Well, my name is Michael Crosby, and I'm a candidate for Potus. I'm addressing the Justice Department today. Now, frankly, there are so many items, it's impossible for me to give a single presentation to the Justice Department and convey the amount of material that has to be conveyed. I can start off with some things positive, but there's going to be things negative. The concept that we must have a fabric of law, of rules, to protect the core of everything that this nation is, should be something everybody needs to accept. The concept of saying that literally, when it comes to certain areas of law, that nobody should be immune from prosecution. No congressman, senator, not even the President of the United States can be immune from answering for items that are actionable. Respectively, there are just so many items to get into, it's a bit difficult. I'm going to try to explain to people why it is I was the first candidate to file for running for the White House. As a pre-declared candidate even, I was a candidate for the White House. When we have a current situation that has the two current recognized major candidates literally having baggage that, quite frankly, is unacceptable. Baggage that has very, very serious legal connotations. In fact, one can make the argument and say that literally there are charges that go to the core of the Constitution that embrace punishment that in fact is the death penalty. This is a very difficult, pivotal time for the very concept, the very core of justice. There are many people that have problems grasping what justice is supposed to be. We have political insertions and we have rebellion within the Department of Justice. We have constant problems, as we have had not just for decades, but basically since the very beginning of the department, that deal with foreign and domestic intruders. This is a problem that is going to basically always be a problem, because the reality is it's impossible to have a large department and not have parties that want to infiltrate it. And when there's a will, there's always a way. This is something that has to be dealt with, sometimes on a daily basis, by people at the Justice Department. It's important to understand that there are many people that they became a member of the Justice Department in order to serve a higher cause, a higher principle. This is something that is definitely recognized. As I move forward, not only in my campaign, but as I reveal decades of research that have elements that deal with the very core of justice. There are many deep concepts and realities that people even at the Justice Department don't understand. And some of these deal with very high technology. Technology that apparently seems to be real, that people are confronted with of various types and natures, and they can't simply seem to get disclosure when they feel that there is a real need to pursue a greater understanding of what these apparent technologies are. What are their purposes? This is an area that is frustrating many people in the Justice Department for many years. And some will still be frustrated for many more years. I can only convey certain amounts of information in certain areas because I am also a scientist. I also work with technology. Technology that is something that most people can't understand, and I don't have time to talk until I'm blue in the face explaining things to people that aren't going to be able to hold it in their heads. And we all know that there's a reality that different people are walking down the road of life, and that basically no human beings are perfect. But the diversity, or to some of us it might seem like a series of flaws. This is a reality we're forced to live with every day. Lately we've had a political rebellion that has reached literally every area of the country. We have a lot of realities concerning the Justice Department that are tied to various types of political manipulation. There are a lot of difficult decisions and choices that people make because they feel that they're forced constantly to deal with the lesser of two evils. The future of the new core of the Justice Department, the new technology to come into play, is at a pivotal key point. It is crucial for certain types of technology to be integrated into the Justice Department. There is the highest need for ethics at each stage of implementation as technology integrates with people and the people integrate with technology. It would be nice if I could convey more of a deeper relationship, but I have to make a generalized addressing, which means that there are certain classified elements that I can't reveal, totally at least, publicly. Times are going to change. New information will become available. There are deep understandings about the very core of our nation that deal with spiritual and various other types of encounters. UFOs, aliens, these types of different events. We could debate about a higher order of cultures that come from far away. We could debate about a temporal policing system that someday, somehow, there is technology that reigns justice parameters respective to everything that is part of the core of a temporal policing system. We could say that among higher cultures that inevitably this would have to be. If we address high technology that has been revealed, such as the attosecond, faster than light communications. Myself, I have done research in faster than light communications. I have done custom work in quantum aperture technologies. Sadly, a lot of the work that I have done has been in my own lab for the most part. I have had interactions with other parties, but unfortunately, the concept of technology that is both expensive and requires extreme ethical handling means that it is difficult to interface or get funding for certain types of technology. Examples of some of this technology appear in fragments that some people may find in records concerning my interaction with various parties. These items can become very deep. On 9/11, I was a little busy checking on something that I had come to conclusions on as a likelihood just several years before. It culminated with different actions that I felt were necessary because of knowledge that I had obtained, because of analytical work, and because of quantum aperture technologies. The difficulty remains with me because 9/11 was just a few days ago. And the reality of that day stays with me. As I was literally on the phone with the team at the Pentagon as an aircraft struck and killed them. And they were professionals to the end, conveying what information that they felt they had in hand that was crucial. In the last moments of their life, one of them noticed out the window that an aircraft was coming in at them. And they all began to start screaming. First, it was a female member of the team. But then the males began to scream. And they decided, working harmoniously in unison in this scream, to change their scream on the data from aircraft to drone with the last moments of their life. In unison, they agreed in a scream what was occurring and relaying that information out to the only apparent line that was live at the moment, which was me on the other end. So it then becomes my duty to deal with that information, which of course is difficult. When the reality is a drone strikes the Pentagon, and it would seem that the drone electronically was overthrown, overtaken. That's not necessarily a piece of information you would want to readily reveal publicly, because you wouldn't want to have copycat occurrences affecting technology at such a crucial point in development. The implications could be far-reaching at the time. Well, many years have gone past, and we don't exactly have a complete report surfacing and public disclosure. But at a certain point in time, people have to say there's been more than enough time to do those investigations and come up with the electronic countermeasures necessary. That should be obvious, because if we haven't done that by now, we would be in a very sad state. There are many types of ways to look at this technology. I could give several lectures about the electronics involved in the theories to deal with this. But I'm going to move on, because my day wasn't over, because I had to still work with other information based upon fragments. And coming to a conclusion that the tactical logic indicates something, and that fragments of information retrieved from quantum aperture technology indicates certain things, emotional states, the reality of certain objects. These would be two Stinger missile teams that entered the country that in fact were foreign, and that their intent was to strike the president's aircraft simultaneously with these Stinger missiles. Conveying this type of information to the Secret Service and telling them that they have to come up with a brand new plan because for all intents and effect, there's been a massive breach. Why? Because there's always massive breaches. You can't have large departments and not have ongoing breach problems. It's impossible. So it's difficult to convey and convince people in a short period of time that they're on the phone with an analyst, and they have to understand that our nation is in jeopardy, that the president is in jeopardy, and they have to come up with a brand new plan, and now it's their responsibility to come up with that plan and implement it in moments in order to minimize attacks, because the intent of bin Laden, the intent of terrorists for 9/11 wasn't just to make an embarrassing attack. It was more than just making a financial leveraged gain because they knew ahead of time what they were going to do and estimated effects and made major financial investments based upon that. They were trying to do something more. They were trying to trigger a nuclear war. They were hoping to get an aircraft to strike Congress and do great damage. They were hoping that they would be able to down the president's aircraft and cause such disarray that the United States and other countries would become in a mood of panic, and that other fragments of information might suggest a course of action that would be the wrong one, which would be to basically initiate a nuclear launch. These are difficult items to deal with, and we have people that have millions of years of experience running scenarios that are responsible for dealing with their area of this given type of situation. But there are other people that also have to do their jobs in these difficult times. They have to make judgment calls as to whether or not the communications are going out and whether they need to hand carry information, literally, to keep government operating, to keep lines of communication open and let people know that there are lines of communications open. These are difficult items when we have a crucial intersection that involves a massive attack from a foreign, and it can also be from a domestic entity. Yes, there was more to the investigations and items dealing with these areas, but that can be for another time. The reality of where we are today is that we have a great opportunity to be able to give birth to a brand new baby. We can bring in AI assistive tooling on levels that are hardly conceived in many people's minds of today. This tooling can be very assistive everywhere. It's necessary to install. We need to give an edge to everybody if we can. Yet we have to have people perfectly capable of doing everything manually if they have to do it with a piece of paper and a pencil to continue to move justice forward and protect the core of concepts. Under my administration, there would be many upgrades very fast because there is additional information that gives additional legal leverage for me as president to be able to force change. There is also certain powers granted in certain situations and to presidential candidates. I filed for presidential candidate panel rights and full trial rights. These can be a presidential candidate panel on treason. They can be a president candidate panel on many subjects that might be appropriate, because we still literally are in insurrection and mass rebellion. And some people would argue that the country's always been in rebellion. That's a bit of a different aspect than what is happening right now today. The literal consciousness of the nation itself is not just problematic. We are all in jeopardy. Literally protecting the concept of consciousness and what consciousness can be is something that is in our hands, and many people at the Justice Department are working with it each and every day. There are many realities I want to move forward with, but there are also other reasons that people would want to know why it is I am refusing to withdraw, even though it would seem that I am outnumbered by two superior opponents. Number one, as I filed to run for the presidency, I did it in an original way through the United States Archive. This is the method that is done if insurrection, invasion, or mass rebellion occur. This takes into account a strategy that deals with the city of Washington being burned, parties being cut off from funding. It is a core power granted to a presidential candidate to fight to protect the Constitution and to restore order. When I have firsthand knowledge that deals with opponents committing crimes, violating the Constitution, violating their oath, I do not have to withdraw because an opponent seems to be getting more votes, but they are involved in criminal activity that disqualifies them as a candidate. Technically, the Constitution and Articles state at this moment that both of the major candidates literally are disqualified as candidates. And it's very important to understand these concepts, because the Department of Justice is going to be repeatedly asked to assist in matters of law, in matters of constitutional nature. And there's going to be a constant difficulty with politics inhibiting people being able to properly research and move forward with what is right for law. Sometimes people would seemingly only have instinct to move forward on, because parties would deny them resources that they need, yet they still have an obligation because you've taken an oath to the Constitution of the United States. When I filed the presidential candidate panel, the framework that I put forward and documents that I generated state that fMRI lie detector technology is crucial. And it is crucial. It's a crucial item of technology that's not only here today, it's been here for quite a while. Many people don't understand that technology. They don't understand that there are different methods for using that technology, that calibrating people in such a piece of technology is a time-consuming item, and it can be ongoing, as testing can start with a subject, and full calibration is not necessarily done. The proper implementing in many cases also requires pharmaceuticals for the leveling of the mind and to bring consistency to the situation. Many people would measure this likened to chemical evasive. Well, they'd be somewhat correct. But normal medical procedures have these methods used for stabilized patient interpretation. It's a standardization in many ways. But yes, there is more extensionalism to what you can do with the pharmaceuticals. There are also extreme scenarios involving psychological arrangement of questioning and the timing and implementation of how this type of questioning is done. Of course, the technology deals in many cases with key fragments of information that, if done properly, can reveal certain aspects that would be seemingly impossible, such as a serial killer having knowledge of what's inside of a drawer inside of a little girl's room that was murdered, a location they were supposed to have never been at. But how could they know something about something in a drawer that was handmade, that only a few people knew the existence of? So, of course, arranging questions and not revealing certain information to see if you can get an associated fragment is crucial. Florida has utilized this technology. You might find the most prominent listings for that state. But the reality is the technology is getting better. I could talk probably for weeks about aspects, theoretical and real, respective to fMRI and where the technology is going. Miniaturization, different types of calibration, different aspects of various types of associated material. I could talk about similar technology, biological radio. I could talk about emotional mindsets. Some of these technologies were developed by the Germans in World War II, and that work was based upon stimulus research done in the 1920s. There are many aspects we are ready to move forward with, and there are companies actually moving forward with this research. Cerebral interface is a project that many companies are involved in and have an interest in, and that includes companies that I had that are shelved now, doing distance readings. There's additional research I was involved in. It's extensive. To be able to take an entire legal data bank of everything that is law and work it into an AI, work it into an AI system, a multi-agent AI system. So as I've spent decades studying AI and actually developing the cogs to make the device work on a level that the design was not going to have the chips, technology, available for 20 or 30 years. I couldn't find the funding to do what I wanted to do, but that didn't stop me. So I was working with the math sets that were larger than the chips could possibly handle. Now things are changing. They're changing rapidly. Now my research from 20-some years ago is incredibly valuable. When considering an assistive tooling device, law has to be part of an overall aspect. The enormity of the device that I was working on had such a large full scope that I have to say that in the raw, I would use that system effectively. But that system, as I initially designed it, had to have other design aspects to be able to use for public use. Because the system that I design will do almost anything. It will do evolutionary technology development. This is obviously something that is a non-export item. Something that in the hands of foreign governments would be very dangerous. notwithstanding other aspects. The crucial point to track back and say that my vision, my research to bring about a more effective sensitive system of sensors was successful. I could get accurate readings involving the brain from 20 feet away with a custom designed array. It was large, it was heavy, and it wasn't an fMRI, although it could do things very similar. Of course, I was going to miniaturize this technology. That was the idea. But much of that research would get shelved for a while and then be referenced from time to time. The effective area in the vision now is before us today. When we look at the aspect areas of having a device that knows all law, that is literally tied to you. If you can imagine a courtroom where we have devices for all parties, where you're tapped into a computer that's basically a big, huge piece of assistive tooling. And this assistive tooling is going to help guide you if you make an error in law. It can also give recommendations. It can pause parties and let them know that there is an ongoing recommendation that is suggested, or multiple recommendations. Usually it's multiple recommendations. This effectively is the system that we're looking at implementing right now today. We have various companies with various levels of integration, different types when you're looking at a database. But the system that I envisioned and worked on had both aspects. It could be utilized either way at a very personalized level. It had to be a diverse device to give you a better scope to understand the diversity and differences between opinions and what is purity core. What is real truth? What are the balancing factors? How do you relate the equations mathematically to make this device real and have it have an understanding of what real truth is? That's where you get into that big difficult area, because a lot of people want to think that they have opinions. Unfortunately, science doesn't always work that way. And sometimes there's more to science than people think there is. And sometimes faith is actually science. If you're Jewish, there are many words that are utilized, if you're a Jew, that encompass multi-meaning in one word and in one phrase. Whereas you have other parties that are Christian that have been taught that there are different levels and that these words only have one meaning and not 3 or 4 or 5 meanings that are all in balance. It is crucial for certain types of understanding to end up coming to a mathematical harmony of levelization. This is for the obvious understanding that there has to be some form of standardization of the core. Again, here with these items, I could talk for weeks. But to jump to a crucial area, repeatedly discovered, was problems. Problems with ethics, problems with government, problems with policies, problems with what we were doing as human beings in our everyday life and in our jobs, whether we were private or in government. So we literally have confusion, and we have areas where we have created conundrums. Policy can be a very good piece of assistive tooling. It can also be an illegal document. It can be diabolically opposed to the Constitution of the United States. What some people might think sounds like a level-headed idea actually might be a horrible weapon. It might denature the methodology of constitutionality. And this is a great danger. The very nature of what people have done from a legislative level, and it translates out to the rest of the areas where it's deemed appropriate, has unfortunately many laws that have been created that are not constitutional. Laws are created faster than constitutional review of those laws occurs. This is a problem. It is definitely a problem for the justice system. The justice system has forms of conundrum. Policies that are forced upon the department itself from outside the department. This obviously brings problems. We also have factors involving the constitutionality of do not discriminate against people for their personal beliefs that has from time to time serious problems with what people personally believe actually being not in harmony with the Constitution. Literally forms of taxation that have been invented, many of them stopgap measures, are not constitutional. This can be very confusing to people who are trying to figure out laws that would seem to give them a headache because it doesn't seem to actually make sense. And that's because they were not constructed properly and in constitutional harmony. And this is a crucial period where the Justice Department has no choice but to protect the forward movement of stabilizing technologies. This is going to be difficult for some people to grasp and to roll with. When we have situations where the Justice Department itself is in collapse, if somebody calls up on the phone and the person on the phone is not trained properly, instead of having them deploy a team to roll and do fingerprints and follow proper empirical methodologies, they're following a policy methodology that is wrong. It is allowing materials that are classified to get further and further away from their point of origin, as a rollout is what is required. If the situation, as it has been going on, deals with additional extensional factors that involve rebellion, parties end up allowing politics to interfere with investigations at crucial levels. This has happened to me many times, and as an archiver, when I call for assistance and cannot get proper assistance, this means national security is being violated. It is not for me to have to be obligated to tell what systems, design, or items are currently in a status needing services. Only that the base material conveyed that assistance is needed is all that should be needed for forces to roll out and do their job, because their job may not be able to grasp the material in question. And what parties are supposed to do is do their job. And that means follow empirical methodologies and roll out, do the fingerprinting, do the crime scene assessment, and get as much data as possible so that the material can be worked with as quickly to understand the aspects that will need to be understood. When I bring these things forward, it is to also say that we have wounds in the Department of Justice that have to be healed. And there just simply is no room for certain political, emotional states that are not founded in a constitutional core. As president, I will work to expand certain key new department functions. I've mentioned, obviously, AI, fMRI, evolving technologies, also historical importance. There are many documents and fragments that are historical, that are crucial to understanding the scope of the original constitutional mindset. It is imperative for us to recover as much of it as we can, and it may not sound like it's something that pertains to the Justice Department, but it does. Information repeatedly can become crucial in understanding the mindset to help fill the gaps so that we can discover what's right and what's wrong about what we're doing. Here I can point to keel hauling as an item that is enormously rare, but the aspects bring about key facts that are unavoidable, that modify arguments to understand that the reality that originally, constitutionally, Americans were allowed to do what they wanted, make their own remedies, their own medicines. They could smoke marijuana. This was on ships. They would ship it, they would sell it worldwide. But you find listings that if you were caught smoking rope, they could keel haul you. This is a base understanding of not risking everybody else's lives, being too inebriated, basically, to perform your duties, because the high seas can be dangerous. If you screw up on your job and you lose a sail, the ship is not as fast, which means pirates could overtake you, and everybody could lose their lives. The cargo, if nothing else, would get there in a delayed fashion because you've affected the speed of the ship. So obviously the owners and investors have a stake in the understanding. But the real understanding is a collective of everybody on board the ship feeling at one with whether or not justice was being properly administered by the captain. Here again I can point to another area that has historical links that are crucially important. The Royal German Empire, basically extinct now. There are very few people even alive that have a bloodline to it. Its effective power is apparently extinct, yet the ghost of it lives with us each and every day, and especially for those of you in the Justice Department. It is still traveling throughout the Justice Department. The understanding here, in focus, is that long-term plans were laid, monies were spent. Foreign and domestic influences were involved. Domestic German influences. They made agreements, they made deals with other countries at foreign governmental and espionage levels, as well as other foreign domestic factors, to influence and bring money to the United States and buy for leverage. And into this plan, dealing with the backroom doors, what happened in these back rooms is crucial, because there were long-term aspect plans of influence. The Royal German Empire had a plan for developing a new series of evolving naval forces. So the plans being conceived for metal submarine technology came before we see it manifesting. It was being provisioned into a future. It was being studied. The tactical table values of it were being assessed. Long-term plans were being made. Assessing the United States was a threat in certain ways, and also an opportunity. Had hundreds of the best world scholars that they effectively controlled and were on their payroll, assessed various items in these areas. Among the items, and quick points, high point referencing, is that you have composite technologies, which are thousands of years old. But composite technologies also lead to things like filament winding. The ability for the United States to basically use filament winding was already known. On a large scale, it would be very expensive to take ships and make turrets and certain features of metal vessels, where you would also encompass cork and filament winding, would be incredible for absorbing sound, acoustical echoing. The obvious problem, key point, is that people's nerves were shattered to death from the very first metal vessels, as they seemed to be immune from cannonballs, but the repeated hits of cannonballs and other operations had acoustical vibrations literally doing permanent nerve damage to sailors. And these items were known and talked about as the United States kind of shocked the world moving forward. The United States had the opportunity to do filament wind and cork layering, but decided it was going to take too long and be too expensive when we had war situations that needed immediate production of effective items. So we rolled forward and went with what was the quickest way to do things. These items were known of and talked about between the Royal German Empire, among the British. These things appear in parties and in personal logs. The historical information is unique. It is also very rare. It is also very essential to protect this type of historical information, because understanding the footing for policies to undermine the Constitution of the United States, to undermine the people and to divide the people of the United States, are key high points, as it is part of the residual ghost of the Royal German Empire that lives to this very day and is infected into. It is an infection in the Justice Department. Today, we would have modern ways of understanding what's going on in some of these back rooms. We could make assessments and say, yes, they did this for nature to make profit. Today's fMRI technology, as it moves forward, is a unique tool that is going to be on the table available to understand backroom deals and get to certain points, so long as we have legitimate reason to believe that that may have occurred. But when dealing with true logic, when you're building AI devices and assistive tooling, there are certain forms of logic that end up appearing where words and math become one and the same, and the arrangement of these words lays naked the concept and understanding that somebody has ulterior motives and is hiding them by constructing different styles of wording. At an espionage level, it's been done for years. Infiltration and manipulating policy is a favorite item, even today, of the Russians, as we have a reality that 10,000 people are on the Russian payroll in the United States that are government employees somewhere at some level. This is reality. This is reality. It can go higher than 30,000. Again, it's impossible to have departments that are free of any threat. Obviously, the main operation of spies nowadays is multi-purposed. For profit is the major item, a duality of, yeah, we might have something we're going to do this way or that way, but meanwhile, obtaining various information that we can resell in some way is crucial and very profitable. So understanding a reality that's there, but yet saying we can't go out on a witch hunt. We can't bring back a McCarthy-era situation. No, what we have to do is we have to work with pure core logics, the Constitution of the United States, and upcoming technologies, and begin implementing certain key technologies to protect our most inner cores. This means people need to not be afraid of always being on demand for lie detector technology, because it changes from lie detector technology to psychological stability examinations. It becomes part of people's good health practices. It becomes part of us being assured that we have a deepest understanding of our own security within in key areas. Yes, the technology is expensive, but it's going to become more affordable. But this is the future. These are aspects that we know have been implemented at different areas on key usage when necessary. If we jump back to the intent and follow the money, parties repeatedly got together and had meetings and said, let's do this, let's gain exclusive use and force licensing because it's to our benefit. But to their benefit is also to strip away people's personal rights, people's constitutional rights. This would try to be justified by parties saying, well, we're going to have consistency, we're going to have purity and control of whatever the substances are. But the reality of no matter what it is that you're working with is that there's a constitutional violation that is occurring. Because the mindset says we have a free commerce environment, do what you want, and if you want to manufacture stuff under high quality control, and if we want to have regulation for mass producers, this is fine. This makes sense. But mass producers also have the advantage of competing and being able to produce a product that's not only pure, but more affordable. Yet keeping the competition alive and saying that any American can participate means that's part of keeping a form of honesty up atop the table, so that no company can gain exclusive use. Even though we know that at large corporate levels that you're going to end up with unfair advantages versus standard citizens. But the constitutional original mindsets and many of the fragments historically are still out there, and many of them are someplace harvested yet not connected properly. It is crucial to have a more comprehensive retrieval of all of this information to work with the understanding of these mindsets. We need to get a better understanding of how the money was spent by the Royal German Empire, who partnered with them, and how the division of anti-uniting practices occurred in the United States. These are crucial to understand, and this is why historical departmental research has to be expanded. We even have to think about bringing new areas to light. This is, of course, going to also be enhanced by very powerful AI equipment, very powerful computer programs, different methodologies. You might be using programming and it's not actually AI, but it does what you need it to do, and it tracks very well. So if I'm going to move on away from the reality that there is a never-ending ghost, a Royal German Empire ghost, there is also another ghost that works with those that are of the living, who keep making new ghosts. Let me put this atop the table in a way. Now, tactically speaking, AI has the ability to understand formational logics, where it's getting more and more tuned, where literally, technically it's already here, by the way. Some of us have had the ability for many decades. The question is the answer. So when people are literally writing up bills in Congress that are being sponsored by other parties, and other companies are doing all sorts of things, there is backroom deals being made that now AI will automatically, virtually automatically, be able to detect negative intent, be able to detect conspiracy. So this is something that's not only going to help us with the here, now, today, it's going to bring a whole bunch of old stuff out. It's going to constantly find all kinds of flaws in laws that were made. It's going to find crime all over the place. It's going to find people who purchased more land than they were legally allowed to acquire because of certain laws. So there is a mass capability coming to light, and there are those that do understand that these new abilities coming into existence threaten their criminal intent. This means that if you work for the Justice Department, that you're in danger. There are people who want to deny you tooling, and they want to intimidate you. And there's going to be more infiltration occurring regardless. There's going to be larger and larger money laid down to turn people. So it's very important to understand that this new powerful tooling is going to make a lot of extra work for the Justice Department, by the way. And by the way, this is not to say that the Justice Department isn't already been getting inundated by various parties utilizing high-speed AI legal maneuvering to continually create various forms of frivolous attacks. There are many types of attacks that are being dealt with, and the violence is inexcusable. It's even hit me very, very hard. So the understanding here, for me to lay out where I'm going with my presidency, with my administration, my goals of achieving the White House, and what I'm going to do, I need to make certain items clear, especially to the Justice Department. Because in order to protect the core of the Justice Department, I would have no choice but to overhaul it. I want to reemphasize that this is a good thing. And I want to reemphasize the dangers to people in the Justice Department as this crucial, very, very crucial transitional period is occurring. Because there's multi-transitions, multi-levels where this technology is occurring. And the importance of the transition for this election is far more crucial than many people think it is. And there are a lot of reasons for this, and I'm going to go on with them at a later point in time or at the end. Yeah, I'm going to have to say, excuse me, I do have a lot of interruptions that I have to deal with. Yeah, I hope to edit out all of those neat little inconsistencies, but the various interruptions occur and people will notice anomalies. So I'll be honest about that. There's a lot of items I want to cover, and time is a problem. There are previous items that involve situations where you have people who have entire floors of buildings where they're working on projects. They're supposed to be independently doing the right thing, and they have enormous numbers of convictions upcoming, so to speak. Yet you literally have examples of teams of people, with special ID that come in and say it's been decided, we're taking all of your hard drives, all of your evidence, and we're ending all of your investigations. This is not proper. Now, needless to say, these items can be re-looked at again. However, there is additional understanding, because just when you thought I was going to simplify your job, I'm going to make it more complicated, even though it seems complicated enough. In reality, we also have a lot of research. I've done some of it myself. In fact, some would say it's extensive, that deals with various types of constitutional logic. Again, it sounds like I'm mentioning something that I mentioned before, because it talks about violations, construct violations. And we need to cover some of those because it's very important. There are like a lot of these areas, but let me try to I want to get to two areas still that are very important. Things around facts, around the evidence of the crimes committed by other candidates that are in play, especially those that are committed against me, my campaign, the archival holdings, national security, etc. But I also want to get to structural foundational items. These are of the utmost importance because the economic restructuring of the country is part of the facets that we have to protect, and that we have governments that have the same type of intense technology, and they've been working with it for decades, and they understand their various types of sociological logic to basically influence the creation of policies, the pushing for wording and changes in policies. And these can come from outside forces. These can come from people who would say things in passing where you would overhear them and somebody knew you were working on something or not or whatever. There are a lot of ways to influence the creation of policy. And some of this can be done by people who actually manipulate or molest certain research and documents. I'm sure some of you would be able to find references to those, but it's far more extensive than you might think. Sorry to scare you. Welcome to reality. Now, when focusing on economic treason, there are larger ways. We have MASH, economic sabotage. That's, of course, technically death penalty area, again, constitutionally. But one of the things that has been a big thing is that we have parties that wanted to stop fairness. They wanted to stop generalized capitalism because, again, the historical fragments and the continued recovery are crucial, because we had the burning of Washington, the entire city, as well as strategic attacks by the British during the 60-year wars that deliberately wanted to destroy documents, notes, specific to the founding fathers, well, some of them, and their activity for super enhanced commerce. This basically deals a lot with government-backed capitalism. So the idea with a lot of the original constitutional constructs of some people negotiating, we're on Constitution number 5, by the way, if some of you haven't heard that before. It's a good set of evolving lectures if you can find some of them. Basically, the mindset of dealing with the simplicity is probably a better way for me to explain this. Economy, currency. The government prints currency based upon several factors. Number one, you have to ascertain how much interest is being basically charged by banks, because that's a form of creating currency through a backtoe. So we have to print that money. Our forefathers stated this. Also, the creation of hard assets was considered the best way to move the nation forward. Very crucial. So this has been molested as well. There are parties who do not want to allow parties to have their labor to be bankable. They want to have discrimination. They want a caste system. Again, anti-constitutional, death penalty area. And all of these other various areas attached where they want to deny free and uninhibited asset creation. High point here. Basically, as a rule of thumb here, if I generalize very rapidly, is that if you were to build a house, that the wholesale of building that house deals with a formula that's roughly 70 cents on the dollar. So a $300,000 house is going to cost $90,000 less than its retail value. It's $300,000 retail. So gee, I really miss my mobile units. So basically, you have a situation that involves the government prints that differential. The 30% differential factor is printed by the government, or it's supposed to be. There's the big factor. It's supposed to be. It's designed by the forefathers. It's part of the true value understanding of looking at these percentages. Also, the difference of, this is basically the difference between cost versus new creation. And this was considered the number one way that our forefathers wanted to build a country, because it actually builds a country. The interest factor that I mentioned first is actually more of an emergency stopgap counter-equalization factor. The true nature of our forefathers, well, some of our forefathers' vision, is the creation of new, hard, and longevous assets. Real estate was number one. But other styles of longevous assets were of value too, but not always equated at the same level. A master reevaluation is something that I will be doing, something that I have been considering. I've done a lot of work on it. I'm trying to find ways to simplify it and then turn it into an easy blockchain interface, and have effectively AI be able to get to the point where it can do automatic assessments and be accurate. That's kind of complicated. It deals with a lot of different stuff. I talk about it much in some of my little fragments all over the place in other areas I talk. What's important here to the justice system is that there are parties who want to erode away at the core of some of these economic belief systems. So it becomes crucial for the Justice Department to be able to look at these systems and realize that there are parties who are attacking the very concept on a wide base in many ways. So we have to restore this. This is something that has to be protected. So aside from the different legal matters, I'm also going to mention, since I'm running for office, what my scope, my plan is that deals with parties having their labor being a guaranteed bankability. Now, it's easy when you deal with hard asset generation. If you're with the Justice Department, you're looked upon as being a service-related industry, if that makes sense to people. But you're not married to it. You have every right, if you want to build your own home, to do that. And if you only have part of your time available, you can sub it out to other people. There's plenty of people who have talent that are perfectly workable that you can use. That's part of the plan. If you listen to some of my other material, you'll understand some of the complexities. I put a lot of stuff out there on that. Okay, I'm going to do this base entitlement of who and what we are. Now, if we look at the year 1750, longevity, 38 years of age, we have a system involving 12 to 14-year-olds on average having carpentry and skills basically instilled to them. So they built a house, the equivalent of a small 2-bedroom house in board feet, if you consider all the other wood fencing and smokehouses and all that stuff, of a 2-bedroom house easily in 2 to 6 month period. So this is a 30-house production ratio for a 38-year longevity. 1850 slave computations are about 20 houses plus. Longevity is 28 to 33 years of age, depending on where you live. Some areas were rougher. The modern equation comes out to 480 houses because we now have a longevity of 78 years. We're expected to work 45 years before getting Social Security. Now, there's problems with this. The problem is that with modernized tooling and everything that's happened, our productivity is 480 houses for 45 years of work. So in effect, understanding many of these complexity of core rights, I've talked about them in different ways, stewards' rights and all this stuff, your labor is bankable. And there's no reason that new construction loans wouldn't be granted to each and every citizen. I do mean each and every citizen. And the justice system, I'm going to rely upon tasking to it to say I'm going to want additional research and additional protection in these areas because we have to stop loan discrimination. Because even if somebody's disabled, so let's say someone has a child that's disabled that becomes an adult that is still with special challenges, their parents should be able to basically be able to afford to do something, and that is to act as their advocate and work their child's loan rights for their labor, because their child is part of the insurance situation that we all pay into. We all pay our money, so to speak. We all are born. We need to encompass an all-encompassing, even no-fault insurance aspects. This means loan completion, bond guaranteeism, and various other forms of co-writing, which are very simplified. I talk about them in other areas. Protecting these rights and protecting the core of what is the original vision of our forefathers, or some of them, which was laid out for bankability. Again, we're in Constitution 5. Other notations involving other areas, Constitution 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. These negotiations, these notes are crucial. We have to retrieve them and work them into better logic areas. Please keep in mind that the best of the best logic, most of it has been destroyed. It was destroyed by the British in the 60-year wars. So it is crucial for any fragment that we get to recreate, to understand that there's going to be a gross imbalance. And the reason there's a gross imbalance is because they wanted it destroyed. They had spies that would literally steal the documents, destroy the documents, set fires to people's houses. This is something we have to still repair. As ridiculous as it might sound to some people, we can do this, especially with AI tooling. The importance of allowing equality for max production for all citizens. We must commit to this. It is crucial. We must do our best to protect this. And this means that essentially we're talking about literally looking at the banking system as it is known today and say credit ratings are actually flawed and meaningless. That means a new transition to a new type of logic. All loans are guaranteed, yes. If there's a problem with somebody administrating it and they say their credit rating is wrong, well, then they need advocate assisters. They need appropriate people to be assigned to assist in managing the projects. By doing this, we can get back to a max production status. That means that I'm not asking people to quit their job. I'm not asking them trying to disrespect their environment. I'm saying we need to re-embrace what our entitlement is. So that when I'm saying that we need to look at a minimum understanding of $90,000 in assets to be acquired by an individual citizen due to hard asset acquisition, upgrade, whatever, whether you're going to upgrade your home, add more footage, whatever. This is an average statistic nationwide that I'm working with. Yes, it is complex, but essentially there's a lot of areas where it's a no-brainer It's a no-brainer that somebody can spend $210,000 and they know that house is going to be worth $300K. So they're going to make 90 grand. The government's going to print an additional 90 grand. And the understanding that it is better for the government to be able to legitimately print a solid dollar based on the new asset creation, than charging people taxes. You can get the modeling on this comes out very, very well. This means that we can, in effect, basically have the government make way more money by doing this, by booking us into always having a house project or an extensional aspect of the house project. So, if you want to live in a tent on a beach and be an artist, but you only do it 3 days a week, and the rest of the days you do something else. Maybe you're a fireman, or maybe you work for the Justice Department, whatever that is. I don't want to put a gun to the side of your head, but I want to move things forward where they need to be rightfully moved forward. Because if we go back to the original solid plans of our forefathers, or some of our forefathers, we will be able to begin phasing out taxes altogether. Because the original construct, as many people have noted, is that we're not supposed to have all of these taxes. They weren't supposed to exist. And there was a design mechanism so we wouldn't have to do this. But there were emergency needs which forced taxes on emergency situations, and then we had parties in greed doing backroom deals to make certain things exclusive and to unnecessarily require permits and blacklist people. This is part of the fighting the greed factor and restoring original max productivity and hard asset generation is a form of restoring our stewardship factors, which many people have lost touch with what the stewardship factors originally were supposed to mean. There's going to have to be an overlapping area for the Justice Department to deal with some of the fairness in some of these areas. Hopefully we'll be able to turn things into a lot of automated systems, blockchains, and then have oracle factors where we have Justice Department people look in on certain things to see how they're going, being managed by large databases, and that's going to be an oracle factor, not to necessarily overly bog down the Justice Department with any given area of possible loan discrimination when we have to have complete open loan factors. So this is a positive light. The positive light to say that the average 12 to 14-year-old of 1750 was enough of a carpenter to keep building their own homes perpetually. So basically, people who obtain additional skill sets and professionality should be making more, but for some reason, it didn't work out that way. The Justice Department is constantly going to have stress because people are going to look at this situation, and as AI helps reveal the truth that the average citizen for 45 years of work has the equivalent value of 480 houses. This is assuming the normal parlay factor. Obviously, once you have 10 homes, you have additional resources. You can amplify your, I talk about this in other places too. So, literally, we have citizens that are ready to riot. They're very upset. They can do the math. They can see it. It's rather simple. They've been forced into economic slavery. And this economic slavery has not spared any area as far as I can tell, including people who work for the Justice Department. We have to address this in a practical, honest way and restore people's productivity and buying power. And what I've just mentioned is one of the best ways for us to retrack and get back on course with being one with the constitutional capitalism factors of our original origin. The idealism, when it first started, respective that we can have our own bank and that we could go to our own bank and they would make our labor would be known to be bankable, and we could develop hard assets rapidly, was part of the commitment to founding government to begin with. But the unfortunate problems of war and the 60-year wars took its toll. So restoring part of the original brilliance that has been either faded away, been burned away, or being invaded by corruption has to be addressed. And the Justice Department is going to be a key factor in guaranteeing the continued stabilization of these various areas. So the Justice Department becomes a key player in the stability of stewardship of our economic baseline. In closing here, there's a lot of misnomers. A lot of people are thinking all of these fancy ways of doing economy, and they're wrong. I'm going to tell you they're wrong. They don't model out. What I was working with would model out quite well. The logic of truth is going to flood out with AI. All of this dealing with literally criminal mindsets that have poisoned our system is something that the Justice Department has to come to grips with, has to have a standardized viewpoint, and cannot allow caste design systems. We cannot allow oligarchic, dictatorial, or caste systems to say only these people are the special people and have the right to borrow money. Because we now have a massive imbalance. It's so blatantly obvious. And people are no longer, in many areas, even allowed to build their own home with their own hands. This is lunacy. This is complete and utter lunacy. And the Justice Department is going to have to take a key role in establishing certain understanding. That means the Justice Department is also going to have massive tactical table computers to basically be able to work with making the assessments of how the economy runs. So economics is something that is a weapon. So we literally have the Department of Defense. We have intelligence. Each of these divisions is going to have these type of large tactical table rooms with multiple tactical tables looking at all of these different ways. Because at a governmental level, it has been for quite a long time, well over 150 years, we have had governments that have been using forms of spying, sabotage, espionage, involving themselves in economic sabotage or manipulation of one type or another, as though it is a weapon. So we have to address this. And this means that we have to be able to work multiple departments harmoniously together and be able to come up with effective on-demand analysis that is in our hands. And we're talking about extremely powerful tooling to be able to do this. I understand this is a very large aspect. I almost want to tell you and smile at you and say, you don't even know the half of it. But this having been said, I think I've covered most all of my main points, with the exception of the evidence involving my personal case of why I'm a continuing presidential candidate and why I'm going to say that the other candidates are disqualified because of the Constitution and articles and various stating that these parties basically are criminals. Therefore, they're not legitimate. That's quite a statement to say that we have to address some various other items of fairness of where things are at, what the truth is, as we continue forward with the next segment. Okay, continuing to address the Justice Department. This is intended to be generally the final segment of the first presentation, evidence-based information respective to my campaign. Now, the Constitution and articles on the whole have many areas which describe why people would be disqualified from holding office or handling documents. Among them are an array of items. Some of them have been handled in the media quite well. Acts of war, however, have not been prominent in the media. Basically, with my evidence base, you're going to see documents that are going to pertain to showing blacklisting. Julie Sue, blacklisting. Julie Sue, quick history associated with $31 billion, a record breaker in fraud. It goes far-reaching. The Justice Department is still going to be tasked to deal with some of these areas because we have a mass fraud situation involving the EDD, the construct, the methodology, involving the phone systems, the runaround system, wasting people's time, blacklisting of certain people by names. We have phone jurisdictional blacklisting. We have all sorts of blacklisting that has been occurring. The key point here is that continuity of government and continuity of elections are basically ignored by Julie Sue. So when you have a candidate that says, hey, look, I'm trying to get through, and they won't communicate, this is breaking down the continuity of communications completely. And this is unacceptable. This is interfering with the process of elections in multiple elections. There are multiple election stages. I'm going to primarily focus on certain key election situations. There's a history that goes beyond a calendar in reverse previous to 2005. It goes back into the 90s, the 80s, so forth, etc. But what I'm going to basically focus on is mainly the understanding between 2005 to present. In that understanding, we have a series of players, so to speak. We have Kamala Harris as a major player. We have the current AG as a major player. We have multiple secretaries of state as major players. We also have Julie Sue as a major player. So when you're looking at current Secretary of State Shirley Weber, she basically is refusing to assist a candidate that is both under attack, but she's also refusing to assist a candidate that is under attack on certain areas in certain ways. Financial income. When the state of California owes somebody vast amounts of money due to the direct known actions of the state, namely shutdown, stay-at-home orders, etc., this basically deals with intricacies that go a little bit beyond. Extensional beyond is part of the income of the candidate happens to be seasonal, related directly to the process of elections. Specifically, petition gathering. This is very important. There's a nonprofit aspect and then there's a direct labor aspect. We have the direct labor aspect that has modifications such as California updates and laws respective to how much volunteer time somebody can do, and then they have to be paid for their labor. So there are modifications in there that are little tiny splitting of hairs and whatnot. The importance of understanding the overall basis that it's impossible for the Secretary of State not to understand that there's a state of emergency. In fact, a multiple state of emergency. I would say that it's impossible for Shirley Weber to not understand that we have both an insurrection and rebellion status situation, as well as a COVID pandemic shutdown situation. So having these where Congress definitely ordered the money to be paid. Keep in mind, Congress ordered money to be paid, various ways of turning in results for claimants and estimated claimants are part of items that California did what? California already collected money, which means, respective to me, California had already collected the money. So based on, you can look at it a lot of different ways, definitely from the very first turn-in claim. The turn-in claim is a specific request that goes on a tally, that gets into a report, that is tallied into a sheet, that is reported over to other areas of government, that taps into that provided government funding from Congress. So basically what we have here is compensative funding beyond the shadow of a doubt that California's already collected in my name, and they're sitting on it. And this deals with, if we look at, there are many avenues of compensation that we're due, but if we just look at labor, just the labor factor, this is verified by records at the Secretary of State concerning previous petitions. Parties' signatures were put upon petitions. I signed as a witness because I witnessed these people sign the documents. Now, this is something that was right in hand for the Secretary of State, interdepartmental, 5-minute phone call. And it's a 5-minute phone call to tell somebody total instructions for them to contact interdepartmentally the EED and say, this guy's a candidate, his income's been attacked, that's an act of war. This guy has to be paid like immediately. He needs money to post on the ballot because all of his income, all of his avenues of income have been ordered shut down. Okay, so this deals with acts of war. Destroying a party's income is an act of war. That's going up to their camp and personally destroying their income. That's an act of war, defined by Constitution and articles. So when we have the Secretary of State refusing, when requested, to post monies for $6,000 posting for me as a gubernatorial candidate for the California special elections, this deals with an understanding that there's a dereliction of duty. You can say dereliction of duty at the very least. There is a large array of charges connected that will go down on Shirley Weber. But we can definitely say there has to be at least one. And dereliction is definitely there because we have constitutional oaths. When the evidence is also in the hand of the party in question to be able to make a decision and say, yes, we can grant this person's name to the ballot, because we have other documents that have been delivered, interdepartmental documents, COVID orders, shutdown orders. These types of documents are also in the memo system, in the notice system for the Secretary of State. There are very serious charges depending upon how you look at the different ways, because we also have the candidate who is also an archiver. We also have archive, and we also have artifacts. There's a list beyond those, but I'm using those as the major point items because those have death penalty charges. When you read the Constitution and articles, those have death penalty charges. So this is not a game. This is not a game. So the negative effect that Shirley Weber would not post my name to the ballot means that effectively we have this rebellious attitude of different parties. We have insurrection and rebellion. There's a lot of ways to split hairs depending on how much evidence that you have atop the table on your tactical tables. If you're running lots of tactical tables, it's different in many other states. I don't have all of it. Okay, I don't have every state statistic and every investigation, because some of that information is privy to being in an investigation. I can use some of it. Yes, there are other reasons why, dealing with parties connected to insurrection, violence. Okay, well, then we also have rebellion. So if we nutshelled it and said, on the whole, from my point of view, we have what is publicly disclosed obvious as insurrection by Republicans, certain Republicans. Let me say certain Republicans, but we also have rebellion by certain Democrats. Notwithstanding what their mindset is for trying to choose between the lesser of two evils and end up breaking the law in the process somehow of what they're doing. So we have the special election California that had the gubernatorial section. in which basically, statistically, because I had a fleet of RVs, because of my strategy to use these RVs, because of the new services and computers that I was going to bring online, because of the vast array of issues that I have, statistically, there's an identifying marker that the computers identify with as stating that I was estimated to get 40 to 45% of the vote. Actually, the majority of the vote in that section. And that's based upon the fact that Gavin was not running in that statistical area. He was not allowed to run because of the nature of the way the recall works, which means that people seeing just a dozen or more, just 12 RVs has 1 million eyes a day being exposed to me in my campaign. So just in a very short period of time, I could have ran these vehicles and they would have been noticed. It would have been impossible to notice because why? You would have a news building and all of a sudden the news building is surrounded by 12 RVs with my name on it. That would be impossible for that news organization not to notice. The same thing with people on the freeway. It'd be impossible for them not to notice. That means they'd have links to all of my links. My methodology is another separate considered item that deals with how I hook basically statements into a domain. So this also is important, a factor to understand. I'm not going to go into the Google aspects and some of the other aspects. Those are modifiers. I'll go into those another time. But so basically we have a no-brainer. We have a no-brainer where I would have been on the ballot. Way more than 10 million registered voters in California would have heard my name. I would have been seemingly a household name in California. Now, getting 40% or 45% of the vote, even 38% of the vote, significantly would have had me looked upon by every major media network, showing me on the polls, progress on the polls, covering my issues in my websites. This basically was inhibited because of the direct financial attacks, which are acts of war. So, notwithstanding the violent factors, parties may have looked at some of my other material, Justice Department, involving violence. That's another aspect to be equated as well. But basically, we can move forward and say, I would have been a major odds-on candidate going into this presidential election. That didn't happen. And that didn't happen due to parties committing acts of war. And again, the direct participants are Julie Sue, Shirley Weber, current AG's office. Because there's a problem, when you get to the AG's level, we have a problem with the factor that involves policy. And you cannot have a policy where the hierarchical structure basically abandons the voters. You cannot abandon protecting a candidate. You cannot abandon protecting the process of elections, stating that because one of your employees, who, by the way, could be a Russian spy or whatever, we don't know, but you cannot abandon the people. It is the job per se and namesake for the AG's office, which is the head of the California Department of Justice, to be the champion for the people and for the process of elections. And that also means championing for candidates. Acts of war and other various attacks upon archives are covered in the Constitution. Therefore, constitutional oath mandates that these items have to be covered. These are acts, these are criminal acts. Criminal acts. This is not a civil case. Part of the problem is they keep trying to say turn it into a civil case. Even had one judge trying to say you had to sign off in order to go to this other court because it's the only one available. And you have to sign off on any criminal charges. I don't have to be compelled to do that. I cannot be compelled to do that. I have a constitutional oath. I have to keep files open on this because the investigation goes on. Why? Well, national security's also been violated. So now we have to add to the top of the table the national security factor involving my files, the archives files. It gets very extensive beyond this, very, very extensive in the breakdown of the charges. They are very, very numerous. We're talking charges, time, individual acts, individual objects that end up getting destroyed, and those parties and their participation level, as they are clearly a liability component. That's inescapable. You can't escape that somebody causing a security problem is not liable. Yes, they are liable. Why? Well, they attack the income. That's an act of war. It's an act of war. So the dereliction factors extend to the AG's department, because technically the analyzation of the policy they're quoting is diabolically opposed to the Constitution of the United States, as well as being diabolically opposed to parties fulfilling their constitutional oath. In other words, the document itself is illegal. It is technically one of those documents that is so opposed to the Constitution that it's an illegal document. In other words, it's one of the documents that no one shall utter a word for the removal of these laws and rules. Yet that's exactly what the document does. It completely removes any form of addressing, which means that that's a death penalty, by the way. So you can sit down and look at the various types of laws in various ways and go through and understand the case value at each level. But understanding at the minimum that there's always an absolute minimum still brings us to point continuity. So we have point continuity between Julie Sue, Shirley Weber, current AG's office. Now into this we have one more factor: previous actions and attacks against the candidate. Previous and ongoing yet unresolved. It's crucial to understand ongoing, unresolved, because now we date back to going all the way back to Kamala Harris. So when we're dealing with previous items of blacklisting and attacks against the candidate, we have witnesses that go all the way back to dealing with Arkansas doing review and investigation and saying, these charges put against this guy are completely erroneous. They're ridiculous. They don't match anything at all. Nothing but a whole big, huge accumulation of lies. It's all false. So Arkansas would prosecute this officer if I could get him into the state. They're stating they previously tried, and working with these other various parties, could not get extradition from California. Again, that's a cross relationship to who? Kamala Harris again. So my repeated request for AG assistance, Kamala Harris, to basically prosecute these bad officers and protect what? The candidate and the process of elections, and an archiver and an archive were, that's the short list. Again, Mrs. Harris is screwed here, basically. Okay, so she's the continuity of lack of actions and various ties and policies, again, have massive violations of the Constitution that technically are the death penalty. There's numerous charges on how you do the case write-ups on these and the different aspects of the way these goes. So this means that the developmental, there's a lot of other areas on the developmental respective to Kamala Harris. It also means that basically Kamala Harris is a participant in committing acts of war and blacklisting against a candidate. She's aiding and abetting parties. This means that she is disqualified to run as a candidate. Now keep in mind, I was already a presidential candidate. So before she even thought about being a presidential candidate, I was already a presidential candidate and a returning and ongoing presidential candidate. So her success is based upon her illegal activity, the illegal activity of Julie Sue, the illegal activity of Shirley Weber, and the illegal activity of the ongoing AG's office. So we have co-workers and direct very direct party, all same party connectivity. There's multiple ways to connect this and talk about the association and the way the association is discussed respective to musters and the base association by the Constitution as well as the articles. So an understanding here that Kamala Harris is an illegal candidate. She cannot be a presidential candidate. She can't get past Congress. These arguments, if we talk about these arguments going before Congress, Congress would look at them and look at these charges and go right through these lists. And the list is more extensive, by the way, but they'd go through the short list and say, she violated her oath, she refused to protect the Constitution and mandatory items in the Constitution. She's a participant in attacking the income of another candidate. It's an act of war. The party is also an archiver. These are very serious charges that come with the death penalty. The list goes on. So Congress is going to look at all this and go, no, she's disqualified. That means that if the election is bullhorsed through, that the delegates of California get seized. It's impossible for Kamala Harris to win. Under no circumstances whatsoever could she possibly win. She's disqualified many, many times over by this evidence. It's inescapable. So we have a situation where basically, how do you deal with some of these matters? There's different avenues. One of the avenues is, I did mention earlier that I did file rights. I listed with the United States Archive. I filed through the Secretary of the Senate to make sure that these documents were going into the archive through her. So basically, yes, I proclaimed not only that I was a candidate, but I proclaimed that operations were basically given notice. California received notice of operations. Also, this is the candidate panel on treason, presidential candidate on panel on treason. But there's other panels and boards of which I have the right to, of which I have partial starting of. The enormous responsibility, again, of constructing a proper panel deals with, yes, the entire design is scalable, right down to if I'm isolated in the middle of a riot and I'm the only person there, that I must maintain the order of law. Yes, it is scalable. But to move forward, I consider it more of a duty to not just do the panel per se with an understanding of certain rules and regulations, but consider that we have a greater problem. We have a poison that is affecting the entire justice system, and that has to be addressed. That's why the fMRIs, that's why the SARs, that's why the willing witness, that's why all these different factors. And so there has to be, and there has been, more of an addressing for a repair construct to occur. Unfortunately, we can have problems with parties saying, no, they are rejecting the sequester. So we have a problem outfitting the panel when we're having a factor of parties that are not adhering to their constitutional oaths and rejecting sequesters. So this is a problem. We also have a problem of modernization versus originality. Originality deals with a mechanism that states under certain, that you give anybody a text notice of something in text written that's connected to Congress, they've been served. That means the newspaper. That means social media. So the modern view has a lot of changes where they decided to keep changing document style deliveries and methodologies. And here we have the problem with cyber attacks. That's extensive, by the way. That's really extensive. We'll discuss that. It also has the insurrection rebellion factor. We'll discuss that as well. Now, the problem is the original stated way also is sealed. It's sealed and says, no one shall utter for the removal of these laws or doctrines. So, this is part of the problem, is that I'm using original validation and parties are not adhering to it. The party presidential candidate need only verbally proclaim. In other words, photographs not required. Verbal proclamation, there's a lot of instances where you could understand the application of this. Application of stating that the British overtook Washington and the Treasury. So there's no money available. So in this case, that modifier is that the candidate, that the United States guarantees all cost to a candidate that needs only verbally proclaim, and whatever their operational requirements are. So if they have to use their own money, which is specifically mentioned, again, all costs guaranteed. So part of the standardization is a new standardization which is not adhering to the request for assistance. When the panel and the candidate are stating that they want assistance, they want communications, they need polls, they need money. So not recognizing the actions and having zero effective return communications means that we have parties in rebellion. And that's addressed in the Articles in the Constitution. If these it's not pretty. This is not a game, and it's not pretty. So we have people that think for some reason that invented policies outrank the Constitution of the United States and the Articles of the United States, and they do not. This is a real mess. So the baseline facts that parties did receive direct notice, and certain parties are directly adherent. We have courts, we have judges, we have secretaries of states, we have AGs, we have people beyond the shadow of a doubt. They received information. They know I exist. They know what my claim is here. So this is something that's kind of a big deal, where basically the understanding of how law works at certain levels needs to deal with, is law involved in rebellion or insurrection? So that's another aspect. So when we're looking at positive evidence being given, which will be, again, it's already been displayed many times. It's all over X. It's all over Twitter. Twitter goes to Congress. It goes to Congress. There's all kinds of notices into Congress, so forth, etc. It's all wrapped around. There's 15,000 tweets. Every one of those is actually recorded by Congress. We have YouTubes. We have the connections. We have all these items, all recorded by Congress because of archival methodologies. So we have numerous communications to numerous parties. They know they got communications. They know that I'm real. So what we have here is an extreme patience for me to basically properly put this panel together and utilize. See, what would be proper is that I would get financial assistance and cooperation from departments, and departments would want to participate. This would mean that I would have various parties from various departments assisting. This means the Justice Department itself, that you guys would be assisting. This means some of you guys would be interacting, participating, helping, investigating, assisting with processes. This also means the Treasury Department would be cooperating. The Federal Election Commission would be cooperating. They're not cooperating. So this brings about a whole lot of stuff where basically the case is the case, and it still stands up before Congress. So even though I've been before several judges and the judges did not do things proper, I've been before judges on different matters or associated matters that have a cross association. They're not listening when I say that you cannot compel a candidate to appear in a court of non-record. Therefore, I demand it, if you're going to continue, that everything be made record. I demand everything to be put into record. And they don't want to comply. Well, that's a dead hole right there. That's a completely dead hearing at that point. don't want to go into those other respective understandings of what's wrong with some of those areas. Those go into a whole nother offshoot of extensive items, which are a diversion and an extra burden upon the candidate that shouldn't be occurring. So into this, we also have, guess what? Life-threatening. There's been 2 attempted assassinations by gunfire on my person. There's enormous amounts of violence that have occurred focused at me. We definitely have a RICO situation. Definitely a RICO situation at the very least. So we have a cross-communicative sharing, and we have a situation. Let's look at what's ongoing. Ongoing situation is that the EED, the Secretary of State, and the AG's office are refusing to cooperate. They're refusing to turn over the money that is owed. They're playing what's called an insurance upstairs, downstairs game, and the Board of Equalization, California, whatever, they don't return their calls. Their mechanism says you call them, you can only set appointments by requesting them by phone, and you give them information and they'll call you back. They never call back. Interesting phone record investigation that will be. So regardless of that, that is their invented system that is invented after the fact. It does not address the original constitutional demands, original constitutional authority, and original constitutional orders. So when we have overall still the state of California not assisting, the AG office not assisting, these parties, again, additional charges. So when we talk about people talking about overall methodologies, superior knowledge, the term and use of superior knowledge is key, because these parties have both access to virtually unlimited knowledge, legal assistance, as well as funding. They can do pull orders. They have, for all intents and purposes, unlimited funding. And these parties do have professional training. So these parties are with superior knowledge, and they know that there's a situation. They know people have done wrong. They know that certain people are entitled to certain rights. They know that the voters have been disenfranchised. They know that the process of elections have been intruded upon. They know that acts of war have been committed against a candidate. So superior knowledge has got hooks in these people on the large. So understanding the base understanding in the claim is that under no circumstances I was a first declaring candidate. I was repeatedly requesting for my services as I was an archiver, and these parties intentionally denied me services, causing an entire convoy to be frozen. So this is a problem. This is a problem because they are aiding and abetting attacks against a convoy, an archive, a fleet, a candidate, an election. This doesn't go away. As these parties think that they keep trying to make it go away, it's not going away. So we have additional supportive evidence in various different ways on how things turn out. The understanding that violence against a candidate not processed, not assisted. We're understanding that all of these crimes that have been committed and they're not assisting. These are serious, serious crimes. This is not a game. There's no excuse for why these people aren't responding. These people answering questions before the United States Congress are going to look really strange when a lot of certain questions come through, and they're going to try to make excuses for what they're doing. And the problem is, it's that these people have violated items where someone can read our base core simple documents, the Constitution and the Articles, and these people are basically screwed. So that gives you an initial introduction, basically. Initial introduction And beyond that, there's also the understanding. When I declared panel, this is a treason case scenario as well. This means the parties are A, not allowed to lie. B, they're not allowed to make excuses. C, technicalities do not apply. It's very crucial to understand this terminology in here. So only the graciousness of the patience of the presidential candidate panel on treason, as well as my personal patience, is basically dealing with a RICO protection situation, trying to find a way to resolve this, when the reality is we have mass rebellion. Insurrection, we have, 1,000 convictions or so? That's mass attack. So, this is not 30, 40 people breaking windows to get in to get a loaf of bread. Okay, this is way different. And we have perhaps some of the same people involved. So we have many parties who are involved in rebellion. We have many parties that have been involved in insurrection. The resolving of the violence against me deals once again with understanding a chronological order of governmental people who are not responding and are in violation of their constitutional oaths to not assist. At the very basics, not even turning over money that's owed so that parties can move forward with security protection, with investigations, with moving items out of harm's way. Again, another definition that just really brings about an understanding of what are these people going to say if they're in front of Congress trying to state these items. And, so where's this going? How much longer can these parties continue in their criminal activity? So does this concern the Justice Department? Of course it does. Of course it does, because the Justice Department's been getting updates and fragments of this material. The Justice Department knows, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that there are communications. Now, how that comes down and how much rebellion is in the Department of Justice remains to be seen. But notwithstanding, I could say that, again, I've stated before, it's impossible to have large departments and not have them infiltrated by foreign spies. And this term is also a yes when you go to domestic agents. So dealing with political aspects, again, there's not necessarily a surprise. There's a certain amount of, generosity and patience respective to activities that should have been occurring a different way that have not. So yes, the Justice Department has black eyes too. So this is also somewhat anticipated in the concept when you have insurrection and rebellion. So the moving forward on items and where the options are at this point is an ongoing assessment each and every day. So at this point, that's 38 minutes. I'm going to conclude the evidence-based basic introduction, which could be more expensive at different times. So this is an important item. So this concludes addressing the Department of Justice. Myself, Michael Crosby, I'm a candidate for Potus, and I am not withdrawing.